and I just be mesmerized by the sound.
And they were cut up really crazy, and I'm like, this shit is dope.
You know, going to Arthur Baker's studio was an incredible experience, you know what I mean? Because imagine you're buying all these records, you know, one of your heroes, and then you're going to his studio.
But I remember when you guys took off as remixes, because I have to admit, there was a record, I don't remember what it was, and they said, oh, do you want them to do it? And I had heard your Latin stuff and hadn't heard Masters at Work, and I thought, I don't know, I'm not sure. I don't know I wish I knew what the record was.
Oh, okay.
But it was a mistake. I should have, whatever it was, I should have had you mix it. Good to see you.
Mic check. Good to see you too, man.
Yeah, so just ahead of the next issue of Wax Poetics and the fact you both got collections with us, just take this opportunity to get you together in London. And I think it's worth starting with, like, you both have long storied careers in New York, and how do you know each other? How did that start? How did that relationship come together?
Well, I was going to the Funhouse and bringing tapes and playing music with Jelly Bean that we were making, and there was a little kid there in the speakers. So he's told me. So I mean, but I guess it's coming from you, because I was like already established and you were hanging there.
Yeah, you know, at that time I was a mobile DJ, you know, throwing your own parties in your neighborhood. I'm from the Bronx. So we would come down to the Funhouse. That was one of our hangouts. We all loved going there, big group of us, 10, 15, 20 people. And I'd just be mesmerized by the sound, incredible sound system, you know, 4 stacks with the fillers. I mean, you know, it was the works, hanging tweeters. And you had Jelly Bean in the booth. And I was a big fan of Jelly Beans, collecting a lot of his music. I was a big fan of Arthur Baker, collecting a lot of his music. And then I started realizing that this was the testing grounds for a producer like Mr. Baker. So, you know, I remember hanging out in the DJ booth. I mean, I'm 17? And seeing Arthur Baker handing over some reel-to-reels. Jelly Bean would put on the reel-to-reels, and they were records that were not out yet. Yeah. But I was already following Arthur Baker and his music, so I knew that it was going to be something that we had not heard before, because I was already seasoned, knowing what DJs do, especially in these clubs in New York City, which was, you know, our kind of church, you know, every weekend. So, you know, I would see Arthur Baker there. One night I saw him hanging out with like New Order and all these groups that we loved. I mean, you know, you would even see Kraftwerk, Madonna. I mean, you know, the scene was incredible. Yeah. John Basquiat, it was New York City, you know, at its best. Yeah. And I ended up meeting Arthur Baker later, which we can get into when we like.
The thing was, Jelly Bean was very different because he would play unreleased music. A lot of the other DJs would be a little more standoffish. I mean, some would. I mean, Larry Levan would play. He wouldn't play a tape. If you brought him a tape, he'd play an acetate. But a lot of Jelly Bean was special because we became friends, and he was open to trying things out. I mean, because testing records before they were done is not anything that was sort of happening before that, really, because, you know, people weren't really doing that yet. And then Jelly Bean was open to that. So I think it was a special place for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all learned from that. You know, watching him, watching Larry Levan, watching Tony Humphries at Zanzibar, you know, they would all have that Technique 1506.
Right.
And if you didn't have an acetate, and if the DJ would want to play it, he would play the reel-to-reel. And the magic of that reel-to-reel is that it had a pitch control.
Right.
So, and it had a cue that you pressed in, and you can kind of cue the record.
Yeah.
So you cue the record, you hit play, and you start mixing. So it was like having a turntable, which is why it worked for even me later, because I took the idea from them, since I worked in the same club in 1986, which was called Heartthrob. What Jelly Bean played was the Funhouse.
Was the same tape machine there?
It was the same tape machine, same turntables, everything.
Yeah.
Right. They renamed the club. The owner of Better Days, where another one of my favorite and one of my mentors, which was Bruce Forrest, played at. He ended up buying the old Funhouse, and he called it Heartthrob. And that's when I came in. And I was already a kid in the Bronx playing at the Devil's Nest, which was owned by Fever Records, Sal Batello. and I was there for 1 year in 1985. That was my first professional club. But then I got my big break in New York City, and it was at Heartthrob, and I was there for 2 years after that.
Did I read after that you used to go to the Funhouse and like when there was nobody there and test out tape?
Yeah, we'd get the keys and we'd go in and just sort of play, but it wouldn't really, it was too, when it was empty, you couldn't really figure out what it was sounding like because it would just echo. You needed people in there.
You need the people.
But it would be fun to just go in there and turn it up, and we would.
Of course,
do it. We'd
man,
go
that was
in.
great. Yeah, we do that too. You get together with your friends and you listen to stuff you just worked on.
Yeah.
Because at that time I had just started working on studio stuff, but just a couple of years before that, I remember 1984. That's when I met Arthur Baker in person. I've been going to the Funhouse since 81 maybe, and had seen him 82, 83, and all that, and. When I met him in person, it was because he used to hire the Latin Rascals to edit for him. Tons of projects. And I was fans of the Latin Rascals, and we became friends. And we became part of a movement called Latin Hip Hop, Freestyle, Latin Hip Hop. And that was in 85. So 84, we were making music together. So they would invite me to the studio where Arthur Baker worked, that he owned. It was called Shakedown. And that's when I first met Arthur Baker. He was working on... I believe Will Downing. What was the name of the project?
Well, Love Supreme. Oh, Wally Jump Jr.
That was it.
Yeah.
He was working on Wally Jump Jr. and
which was Will Downing singing.
Yeah, and I went to the studio, and that's when I met Arthur Baker, and he was really kind and everything, real cool about it. He was like, he didn't mind if I sat in the back and just checked it out. And then the Latin Rascals were there, and they were talking to him, maybe business on records or whatever stuff they were working on, or they were working on for him. And because they would edit in another room, wouldn't they?
Yeah, there was a little closet.
I remember that
really
little room.
Small room, and they had the two tape machines, 2 half-inch tapes, and they'd be locked in there for like hours, days. They'd be in there, and
So what were they actually doing?
They were. What I would do, I was at that time I couldn't really make decisions on things, so I would take, how it is when you're doing a mix and you take like 5 reels of pieces. I'd hand them, like, in the beginning, I would edit as I went. But then as the projects got more complicated, I would just take a lot of tapes, which you've seen actually those tapes.
Yeah.
So say Confusion, I took like 8 reels of them. And then I'd give it to them and say, listen, I want to use this body. I want to break there, do something crazy. And that's what they would do. And I found them on KTU. They were doing mixes, and one day I hear a mix on KTU, and it was all my records basically, and they were cut up really crazy, and I'm like, this shit is dope. And I called Carlos de Jesus, and he got me their number, and a day later they're in the studio. And back then it was like they were both so shy. I didn't even know Tony spoke English for a while because he never spoke. It was Albert would speak, and they'd be really shy. And then within 6 months, you couldn't shut him up. Tony was like out of control, but it was great because that gave the records like this freshness of young kids. I mean, they were like bedroom DJs. They were doing these edits in their bedroom with the pause control on a cassette deck, and then I brought them in and they learned how to do it, and it was great. 2 or 3 years they were doing editing all my stuff, from anything on Beat Street. I don't think they were there for IOU, but it was sort of after that, like Girls Just Want to Have Fun. All the remixes I did, they would get in there and do the edits. So it was a great time.
Yeah, I mean, I was big fans of that. KTU was the big station that played all from disco to electro. I mean, everything. And we used to listen to the mixes on the air, my friends and I. And later on, we ended up being friends because when I started working at the Devil's Nest in '85, I had met them just at the end of '84. They were at the studio with Arthur, and they started doing some productions on their own. And one of the early ones was the Cover Girls, Show Me, which was a huge record,
with Andy Panda.
With Andy Panda, who wrote the tune. And Andy Panda as well, who was a friend, he did a song called Please Don't Go, which is, arguably the first Latin hip hop records.
Latin
there's always
freestyle,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
but obviously we had Lisa and Cold Jam. Before that, with I Wonder About Take You Home, but that came from Full Force producing it. As to where the Latin hip hop style came from a lot of the young Latinos like the Latin Rascals and myself and Andy Panda and Joey Gardner, TKA, India. The list goes on and on. Pam Russo, Cover Girls, Noel. So that whole movement actually was inspired by Arthur Baker's sound.
Yeah.
Between Arthur Baker's sound and the new wave sound of the UK, we always wanted that English, vocalist, which we could never get because we always had, it was like young Latin kids. We didn't have that accent. You know what I mean? It's like, they didn't have that accent, but we loved that sound.
They had their own accent. Yeah. And the other thing was, I always thought, this is my theory, that what made those records so great, the singers weren't amazing, but the fans related to them. It was like it could have been them singing the songs.
Yeah.
So they really related to the singers more than if it's a great singer. It was great, but a lot of those records, the singing wasn't great. I mean, we could also say Brenda K. Starr. Now, Brenda K. Starr, her record, which I did, came out in 84, 85. So she was part of that movement too.
Yeah. We had a handful of singers that could sing, and most of them that,
no, they could sing.
They a lot of the songs were flat. Put it that way, not all of them, but
a lot of them.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
But there were like 3 or 4 singers, and it was Brenda K. Starr, India, and Mark Anthony.
Yeah.
Those were the singers that from our scene
that were
considered they were dope singers. And there's a few others I'm missing, but going to Arthur Baker's studio was an incredible experience. You know what I mean? Because imagine you're buying all these records. One of your heroes. And then you go into his studio where he made those records. I'm thinking about Slack, one of my favorites from him. I'm thinking about all the stuff he did with, all those records with Roby. It was him and John Roby. They were like my favorites, and he knows it because once I met him, I drove him crazy about it. But that whole catalog, I have everything that they've done. And when the Latin Rascals, they had, he got them off of a KTU. They were doing those edits. It was magical what they do because they create, out of edits, beats. They would create these stutters. If you ever hear these stutters on some of his records, a lot of it was the Latin Rascals.
No, it was all the Latin Rascals. No.
All
of it was the Latin
Out
Rascals.
of Touch, Hall & Oates, like all those records that Arthur Baker had done. You see the Latin Rascals name on it. They were editing all those records.
It was great because taking something right from the streets and putting it on a Hall & Oates record, which was, that hadn't been done before, and they had a lot of patience. They would work, and they
it's hours and hours.
And they would make, what was really interesting is that they would make a ruler, a beat ruler. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that.
And they'd get the tempo of the track, and they'd measure it out so that they knew how long like a half beat was, a quarter beat, and they did it with a ruler, which they made on the tape machine. Awesome. They were really, they were super clever, man.
They taught me how to edit. So when I first started making records, Bruce Forrest asked me to do some edits for him. I did some early edits. When I had my first remix, actually, Information Society, which is one of the gold records that you have at Wax Poetic Collections, that song Running. If you noticed, it had that English new wave kind of feel.
That is the one that actually captured that.
But this is a group from Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So I had asked the Latin Rascals, which was Albert actually did most of that record, the edits. And I got that from Arthur. I said, why don't I get Albert to edit it, and I'll go in with him. And that's how I learned how to edit, on half inch.
Did you think you took that approach that Arthur was doing the Latin Rascals? You and Kenny take that approach when you were doing like the more pop remixes and the dubs and later on, or? No,
the Masters at Work mixes were different, but definitely when I was doing the freestyle records, there were some records that I had that you'll see my name with the Latin Rascals, and that was actually inspired by.
Because Masters at Work was more sort of, I don't know if you call it housey, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it was house music. Yeah. It was house music. Yeah. When we were doing the early Latin hip hop records and stuff, another one that was real influential in the scene was Todd Terry. He was making those records before he made house music. And And when he started making house music, real sample based, he was sampling Arthur's records. That's where you heard a lot of that influence.
Yeah, he was.
He was sampling, Planet Rock. He was sampling all those records.
And not paying me anything.
Oh goodness. Okay. I didn't want to go there, but
No.
but-
He's somewhat made it. He's somewhat made it up. You could still do a couple of mixes.
no, it was
for me.
clever what he was doing. But
Party people.
Yeah, when you listen to those records, the reason why
they're great. They're great. I can't.
Well, that's
you
why
can't
house music got harder.
Yeah.
There was a harder sound when Todd Terry came in because he was sampling the Chicago house music. Marshall Jefferson, Larry Heard, all that. But at the same time, he was sampling Arthur Baker's sounds, like the snares and and
Some
little
vocals,
bass
little
loops
vocals
and all
and
these little parts and vocals. Yeah.
But Louie, I had a party 20 years ago, returned to New York, and I purposely Todd, it was the first time he had played here in 5 years. It was 2003. I put him in the same room with Marshall Jefferson.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so I thought it would be funny. They didn't kill each other.
No, they were cool after that. In the beginning, everybody was mad at Todd Terry.
Yeah.
Everybody was mad at Todd Terry because you just heard everything in those records, but the way he put it together, it just created a whole sound and a vibe.
Yeah.
But later on, I guess everybody kind of simmered down about it.
Yeah.
But Todd, he was very instrumental in the freestyle Latin hip hop movement, which we were a part of, in '85.
So was it Todd that sort of helped move it into the house sound, do you think? Or
No, I think he took the spirit of those records. When he was sampling those records, I mean, you would hear, Africa Bambaataa in there. You would hear, Jenny Burton in there. You would hear, I could go on, but I don't want to get into Todd's catalog. But he put disco in there. He just went through.
He changed things. The way he sampled.
The way he sampled, it was real clever. It was at the same time as Pump Up the Volume too.
Yeah.
Right, because that was a very influential record with sampling and stuff with C.J. McIntosh and them. So shout outs to them. But they always say, right, with music, everything's kind of cycling over and over again and done in a different way. And he definitely changed the house sound and made us all start kind of wanting to sample. But when Kenny and I came in, what we did differently was that, we did sample, but more like sample like snares and kicks and maybe some hip hop breaks or whatever. But I would play the keyboards on top and play the bass lines and the chord progressions. A lot of the Masters at Work records from 90 to 95 is me playing keyboards and Kenny on the drums. Yeah. And that's the way we did all those dubs. And that's what kind of everybody gravitated towards Masters at Work because of those dubs. Because I was, I had done about 80 to 100 records in the Latin hip hop freestyle and pop world. Like Debbie Gibson, like I was on her first records. I was on Chris Cuevas, like Saint Etienne, like all those records. But then when Kenny and I got together in '90, they started asking us to remix records, and I would still get those pop artists. So that's why I said, why don't we take the B-sides of the records? And then we started calling them Masters at Work dubs. And it was just Kenny and I and just sampling a bit of the vocal and stuff. But we weren't sampling other people's records. We were sampling the record that we were working on.
Being paid to mix.
Finding a little hook, this and that. So that's what made us a little different in what we were doing. But it's all, coming from, Arthur and the guys from the early 80s who were making such amazing music through the 80s. That was the influence.
Because Criminal Records, that was for early house music, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I started Criminal at '86, and I had been turned on to house. New York, the records, proto house, like Boyd Jarvis, give him a shout out, Timmy Regisford. Yeah. That sound was happening in 83, 84.
The music's got me.
The music's got me visual.
Came out in 82.
Yeah, so there was stuff that sound was already happening in New York, and then Chicago. It was branded house because there's different reasons. People say one because of the warehouse, other people say Frankie's house music or whatever. But what I try to do is sort of combine the two. And when I was doing like Wally Jump Jr. and just going and having fun, those records were meant to be fun. It wasn't like anything serious. It was like answer records to. Jump Back. I did Jump Back. I did Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent with Will. Ain't Gonna Pay You One Red Cent, it was called. So we were just having fun with that. And but I was doing that, and then on the other hand, I was doing these remixes for groups like Fleetwood Mac. the Fleetwood Mac Big Love, that was 87, and that I try to bring house music to a remix of a pop act. And I think that was probably the first one that was a house version of a rock act, you know, and I'm really proud of that remix because that still gets played today and it rips it up. But I remember when you guys took off as remixes, because I have to admit, there was a record, I don't remember what it was, and they said, "Oh, do you want them to do it?" And I had heard your Latin stuff and hadn't heard Masters at Work.
Oh,
and I
okay.
thought, I don't know, I'm not sure. I don't know I wish I knew what the record was.
Oh, okay.
But it was a mistake. I should have, whatever it was, I should have had you mix it. It might have been Love Supreme. It might have been, but then David and Frankie did it. I don't know.
Okay.
It might have been that record. I'm not sure.
But I remember an early one that influenced kind of like the house thing. When you did the Rolling Stones, that dub.
Yeah, Too Much Blood.
That was it.
That people still talk about
Much
that
Blood.
shit. And I've in my collection, I'm actually
What year was
selling
that?
a half inch of the mixes.
What year was that?
84.
84.
Come
See
on,
that?
that's pretty ahead.
Yeah, 84. That's right. I always thought that was one of those prototype house, whatever you call it, you know, type of things. But I used to play that dub a lot. I loved it.
Yeah, it's pretty mental.
Yeah.
I was pretty mental.
And the Rascals edited it too.
Yeah,
right?
they did. Yeah.
So the thing that always fascinates me about your careers really is like that this sort of underground sensibility, but then working like with major pop artists. It's like, how do you like creatively square that? I guess it's a bit more of a sort of floaty question, but it's interesting. You know, how do you think about that? Or is
Well, you guys did it with the dubs.
We did it with Debbie Gibson.
Yeah, you would do the
One
dubs.
Step Ahead. If
Yeah.
you listen to those records, Saint Etienne, Only Love Can Break Your Heart, those were pop records, you know what I mean? And when we got them, we were like, okay, well, we have to block out the song and just listen for something that's catchy. You know what I'm saying? And we were hearing Only Love Can Break Your Heart, but we kind of made it kind of stutter. Kenny did that on the SP 1200. Only love can break your heart. You know that thing?
Yeah.
And then when we came up with that, dun, 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 which that was a sample though. Shout outs to, Italy. It was a record in Italy, that little organ sample. But when I played around it, the bass lines, the strings, all those parts, it gave it a different edge and a different sound. And of course, Kenny's beats were killing it. So we would take those pop records like that and Chris Cuevas. I mean, that was pure. That was not underground, but it was cool when you would go see like Frankie Knuckles, Junior Vasquez, or Tony Humphries, and they were playing a Debbie Gibson record, but a Masters at Work dub, a Masters at Work dub.
But that was the thing.
know?
When you went in, did you have to like give them a vocal version that kept that was the thing?
Well, that was the thing. They were getting two for the price of one with Masters at Work because you was getting the main version, but done up, remixed, and then you're also getting this dub.
Yeah.
And then the instrumentals and everything else that goes with it.
Yeah.
You know? So we were giving them a lot for their money.
Because that was the thing. Back then, you still needed to give the label the song.
Yes.
I mean, at least for me,
I'd go in the song.
I'd go in with Rolling Stones or Fleetwood Mac or whoever, and you need that one version that you could say, well, here's the song. A few years after that, though, when Aman started doing his remixes, the song was gone by then, right? A lot of they didn't at that point. They said, "Oh, just sample something, and then we can put it out." So
Tori Amos, listen to that, C.J. Bolin, right? All those records.
It was just a new record sampling. Yeah. But that was what Todd did too. At that point, it was more like really underground, just like get a little sample and kill it. But because you were doing good pop records, you had to do a version of the song. Or,
Well, Todd was doing it for the song when he did everything but the girl.
Yeah, but that was later on though. When was that?
But it's funny, some of those songs sampled our records. Like Everything But the Girl has Love and Happiness in it, if you listen to the percussion piece.
But is it from...
I Like to Move It has one of our beats in it. You know what I mean? So people were doing to us what they did to
what they did to me.
Arthur, but they were our own friends. You know what I mean? It was our own friends. We were
That's
like,
pretty
all right,
funny, yo, man.
Next thing you know, that record sold 5 million copies, and we're like, what?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. No, but it was definitely driven by, we always sampled, but we made it less obvious. Yeah. And then we played keys on them, so it made it a little different, but it still had that edge, it had that rawness, and then and the bass lines, we would always have those, those big bass lines.
It's like one of the things that you see through like the collections that you guys are doing, and also the articles that are in the next issue, is that you all wear like different hats within the music industry. Like I was amazed when I came to your house, like you literally go from like the contract through to the production, through to the record, the release. And obviously you describe yourself, Louie, as a sort of like a sort of triple threat, basically.
You're more than triple, man. Come on, you're quadruple, man. No, this is the man right here. He's, you know, like his career has been unbelievable. Everything he's done, I so respect it because he is a real music man. It's in his blood from his uncle on and Hector Lavoe. But the bottom line is he's done it all. I don't think he's done it all the correct way, really. And he's still the best DJ out there. So.
Well, wow. my question was, is
really, man.
Is there one that you particularly, define yourself as, or is it
me?
Is it a producer, or is it a DJ?
No, a writer.
Writer.
Yeah. No. If you read my book, which is out now, but if you read the book, I'm a reluctant record producer. It wasn't really the thing I wanted to do. I just wanted to make my own music, and yet because I wasn't a singer and really wasn't a musician, I would work and collaborate. So I think my best stuff was collaborations, But, I mean, I'd rather write a song and then give it to someone else to produce. I mean, like the Tina Turner one, which is my favorite record one of the favorite records I did, because I wrote a song and Trevor Horn produced it, and, it was great. But if I had just stuck in the room with a piano and been a songwriter, I probably would have been happier. I mean, I love doing remixes, because remixes are... You do them, it's done. You don't have to deal with the group. I just, I'm just not, I mean, I see you doing all these sessions now, and I'm so impressed because it's so many of the people I worked with. And this is like 40 years later, and you guys are in there making records. It's unbelievable. I so respect that, because I couldn't do it anymore. I mean, I could do a record. I could do one record or two. But the fact that you're constantly making records, it's unbelievable. To me, I don't know anyone else who's doing it. Look at Jelly Bean. Hasn't made a record in years. He's not even, he's not interested. The fact that you're doing it that way, to the level you do, it's unbelievable. To me, it's...
Wow, thank you, man.
It really,
means a lot coming
seriously, dude, I can't,
from being that little kid watching him,
I'm so impressed by that you could do that. It's like, wow.
It's what I love to do. I love to make records. I love to create things from scratch. I have an incredible family of musicians, from Josh Milan to Anane to and the crew you work with, Cindy Mizell, Lisa Fisher.
I signed those girls for Beach Street. I signed them in 1984. And, they were meant to be part of, before everything sort of fell apart. But you look at them, you're still working with that crew. It's amazing. Audrey and,
Yeah, I mean, they're as active as they ever were. They're still doing their thing and working with a lot of people. But for me, it's I like bringing them in because I get to feature them in the front as to where they sang backgrounds for so many people. I mean, Lisa Fisher's got her own solo career and stuff. But, they've sang backgrounds for so many people, from Luther Vandross to the Rolling Stones,
Bruce Springsteen,
Steely Dan, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, list goes on and on.
But Lisa, man, I can't believe, because she won a Grammy, Best New Artist, and then she just she wasn't a solo artist. She just went with the Stones for like 30, 40 years.
Yeah, she went with the Stones, for all those years. But now she's got her own solo career, amazing band. Yeah. And she's out there.
I saw her play recently in Miami. It was great.
It's really nice that she comes, back, into our world, and she's created some classics with her and Cindy. I mean, Into My Life You Brought the Sunshine. That's Lisa Fisher and Cindy Mizell. Written by Josh Milan, Blaze, Kevin Hedge, and the whole family's on there. So I have a wonderful musical family. I have a band now that I created out of the studio workers, and studio session musicians and artists, and I've been able to bring our music to life, and I never knew that I was going to be conducting a band.
Yeah,
that just happened.
That's the other thing, man.
It just happened in the studio. Maybe watching my uncle, watching my father, who's tenor sax player, in his bands, and watching Tito Puente, who was one of my mentors as well in the early '90s, and I guess it kind of rubbed off. I'll never forget. I was on a ship with Tito Puente when he was performing. It was a jazz festival. And that's when, I was kind of following him around and checking out what he was doing. And he was like, "Louie, I'll be right back. Go count off the band." I was like, and then I'm in front of like 10 musicians, and he wants me to count up the band. And I just remember my dad going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and when I did that, and the whole band came in, I was like,
you were like, you was.
that was it. That was it.
Well, was the New York Soul gig, that big gig that I was at? I actually lived in that building, the New Yorker Hotel, when you did it. Was that the first?
At the Manhattan Center, the Hammerstein Ballroom.
Yeah, that was
the first show. I wasn't conducting them. I was on the side.
Yeah.
I like being like, on the side of the show. I started doing it after that with Elements of Life in 2003. That was in 97. And
that was insane.
We did the first big show for the album. We only did 3 shows for that album because the band had too many stars in it. It was huge. George Benson, Tito Puente, Eddie Palmieri, Roy Ayers, Jocelyn Brown, India, all of them. But we got them in New York.
I was there. It was amazing.
It was the Bartenders Ballroom. So that was we finally got the budget to do it, because of the Bartenders Ballroom. They do that once a year. So they bring in a big artist to do their thing. And that was the album, of the year that everybody was looking at, one of them that everybody was looking at that time. I'll never forget when I heard Janet Jackson saying she likes New York Soul on MTV. I was like, whoa. The people were recognizing, coming to the parties to check it out. It was really a wonderful experience, but we got to do that big show. That
was an amazing show.
Where does the chemistry come from, and how quickly does it happen? And you've mentioned greats there, and obviously I think you've had every.
Well, they're greats. He's some of those guys were greats, and then who are known, and some of them were greats who weren't known, right? So you put in your people, they were,
I think it was, watching, producers like Arthur Baker. I think it's about, getting the best out of the artists. They have to feel good when they walk in. It's that connection got to be made between you and them, and to me, I found that I was kind of really good at that, when you get a call from George Benson, like during the pandemic, and he says, Louie, I'll never forget when we did New York Soul. I really loved the way you produced me in the studio, the way you guys, worked with me in the studio. To hear something like that,
wow,
it means that I kind of did, we did our job.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So that's what we're good at. But I was watching him doing that.
But think of all
in the early 80s.
Think of all the producers he worked with, though. Quincy Jones, Tommy LaPuma, Creed Taylor. He worked with the greats. So there you go.
And to hear something like that, but
because Quincy was good at that too.
He was the one.
He was the don. You'd come in, there'd be a buffet out there, like he would make it like a party in the studio.
Yes,
the food, everything, the vibe. He was the vibe guy for sure.
That was it. I mean, you learn from that, and I used to hear from other musicians how he worked and stuff. And he's my hero.
Mine too.
I think that listening to these stories, going into the studio with someone like Arthur Baker and seeing how he worked with another singer or a musician, and at that time, he was doing like Bob Dylan and everybody else. I was like, geez, it's I was that young kid absorbing all this, you know what I mean? And I think all this is coming out, and it came out in the future and coming out now, when I'm in the studio, it's beautiful. I really love doing that. I really love when I'm in there with Lisa Fisher, and to me, you let them do what they do, and then you put in your ideas, and then you come in with some ideas, and you flip what they have, and they start seeing that. I mean, just the other day, I'm in the studio with Lisa Fisher, and she's like, let me find out, you're hearing tones, because I'm hearing her tones, and I'm telling her to go to a different tone with her voice, and it made a difference in the part. And you can hear it. And then, so she gave me the compliment. I was like, wow, that came from Lisa Fisher,
Yeah.
So, stuff like that. But, it all came from everything I learned as a kid, from Arthur to my uncle.
Did you have any young kids that you've mentored through the production thing? Like,
yeah, I mean, I always do that. I mean, even now, we had a young kid. I invited him to the studio. I said, listen, if you want to come to the studio, just like you guys did.
Yeah.
I said, come and, just sit in the back and feel what's going on. And, and I invited a young kid who was a young DJ from New York, his name from New Jersey. His name is Amir Brooks. And he was just in the studio the other day. He's 23. You know, he's been DJing since he's like 15 or something. There's another kid named Just a DJ. These are the young that I just invited with Anani and I, our party, The Ritual. We had a rooftop party and we invited both of them to play. And he's only 18, you know, but he plays amazing. I mean, a great DJ. For 18, shoo. I was like, wow, okay now. You know, this kid's got it, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're, you know, doing that. I mean, you know, around the world, you know, you invite people, they want to be a part of things. So you invite them to your gigs, you let them understand how it works from going to a sound check to playing the gig. Because even at this stage, I still do every single one of my sound checks practically. And I'm, you know, always making sure that everything is right. Like even yesterday, I hooked up my own stuff because my tech is in Japan. You know, he's coming back the end of June, so I had to do it myself. And people are like, you do that yourself? I say, yeah, I know how to do it. I think you got to know how to do it yourself, you know, as well as having that person who works for you to do what they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's important to mentor, and I learned that from him, from Jelly Bean, from Bruce Forrest, from Tony Humphries, even Larry Levan. I mean, you know, I was able to finally get in the booth by 86.
Finally.
By 86.
Go up those stairs.
I was going there since
stairs.
80, 81, but I finally was in there 86. And I'll never forget, it was when Willie Colon played live with his band, Set Fire to Me, the song that Yvonne Turner.
Yvonne Turner, shout out to her.
Yep, she worked on that. Shout out to Yvonne. And D-Train. And I was in the booth. And I had known Larry by that time. You know, but it took that long to really connect with him. But I'll never forget in the future, early 90s, I played at The Choice, thanks to Richard Vasquez, who took over the loft, one of the old lofts, you know, from David Mancuso. He took over that loft for a bit and started doing these choice parties. And he had recognized a record I did called Freestyle Orchestra when I started doing house music. And when I went in there and DJ'd, Larry Levan was there. And he came up to me and says, Louie, I just want you to know what you did with that Tito Puente record, Rancancan. Nobody else could have ever done that. So he kind of knew my history. He must have knew about me or whatever to say that.
He still wouldn't let you in the booth.
No, the garage closed by that time. But yeah.
No, Judy Weinstein was at the top of the. Remember? She was the security.
David DePino.
Yeah.
What was New York as collegiate? Is it like when you read about, you know, that period from the sort of late 70s, 80s, like, was it, you know, all the scenes were obviously intermixed from hip hop to house to disco, and was it as collegiate as it sounds, or was there cliques and groups and, you know, or was everybody generally supportive and bringing people up? Because it was such a profound period in music.
Well, there were cliques, I mean, but it wasn't combative. There were just people who went to different clubs. I mean, if you were someone who go to Better Days, you might go to Garage, but you wouldn't necessarily go to the Funhouse. I mean, there were different styles of music, and there were different, you know, definitely different cliques. But like one of the nights that really brought everyone together was your night on Wednesday, the Sound Factory Bar. That was where I refound my love of like house music, because we would go there. I'd go there with Victor and Seven Fisher, and everyone would go there, all the producers. And that was a really influential night.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone would go there. You'd go to different clubs, but there was nothing else going on Wednesday. It was Wednesday, right?
It was Wednesday night.
So people would go, and it wasn't like a club. It was more like a bar with great sound systems. So people would go there, and you know, you bring Louie. I made a record called You're Mine that I made specifically for that night.
Yeah.
Brought it to Louie. Then we went back and did a remix, because when I heard it, I didn't like. I heard it differently in that club, but everyone would go there and talk about it competitor, but not friends. Like he said, his friends were sampling his records. My friends sampled my records. He didn't really care. I guess when you sell 5 million, you might care. But you know, it was like there were things like that around. That doesn't really exist now. I don't think. Maybe it does, but
well, I think with everything, there's going to be a team and of people and a clique of people that hang out at that night. That was always happening. Of course, it was. I mean, you know, there were some underground club rivals maybe a long time ago.
Like
I would say one like Junior Vasquez
Junior
and Danny
Vasquez.
Tenaglia, right? That's a famous one everybody knows about. You know, you had Larry Levan in the garage, and you had Tony Humphries at Zanzibar. You know, I don't think anybody had time to go to each other's nights because they were playing the same nights all the time.
And they were.
I think that was more what it was
and
about.
they were playing like a lot of nights. It wasn't like, you know, you'd be a resident, you'd play the whole weekend. You know, it wasn't like.
But you know, it was like the club was the DJ's domain, let's say, you know, and everything really surrounded around Larry Levan in the garage. It did. I mean, you know, if Larry Levan was in a bad mood, you're not getting in that booth. You know what I mean? If Larry Levan was in a good mood, you'll probably get in that booth if you know the right people. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. I mean, Tony Humphries was different. The booth was smaller. You know, it was a long strip, and you could hang out on that side. But in the garage, it was bigger, right?
Big. It was like half this room. I mean, it was big.
But I mean, one day you would look up there and you would see David Mancuso hanging there with Herbie Hancock and I don't know, Mick Jagger. It could be like
Diana
that.
Ross.
It was there. That kind of level. You know what I mean? So that you know, the garage was the top of the. It was our top. Like, wow, this is where you want to be, a DJ with this kind of sound system, and you're home and you're breaking all these records and doing what you do. We were doing what Larry was doing. We were breaking records, you know, later on, you know, so carrying on that spirit, you know, we were always carrying on that spirit. And when the 90s came, I had stopped in the freestyle clubs from 85 to 90. I was playing a lot at Heartthrob, Studio 54, Palladium, like all these places, and I was known for that kind of music, but I was still playing house music, hip hop, reggae, all in one night. Even the new wave music, the DOR, I guess we called it dance orientated rock, kind of, you know, that kind of stuff. And you know, I was playing a lot of that to the 90s, and then I was playing for a young crowd, ages 16 to 20, and it just got a little bit crazy. So I took a year and a half off from the music. And I started with Masters at Work and doing my own album on Atlantic. And when I was doing that, I was able to get my chops up with Kenny. And with that album project for 6 months straight, when I produced that album for Mark Anthony. So, you know, as I made that change, it was Don Welch who approached me and says, Louie, I'm doing this parties called Underground Network. I would like for you to play. Yeah. And I love the music you're making, this Masters at Work stuff. It's amazing. So I said, well, let me take this style and all the house music I love, and, you know, plus the classic house music and the disco stuff, and mend it into one night and you know, just make it a night of great music. And I started doing that with Don Welch's parties. And then he says, you know, Louie, I think I found a place where we could do it every Wednesday. It's called the Sound Factory Bar. It's like an annex club, I guess, of the Sound Factory, which was Phil Smith, who rest in peace, he just passed away. He owned this club, and it had a Steve Dash sound system, which Steve Dash was the man at the time. Like, you had Richard Long in the 70s and 80s, and Alex Rosner. Then you had later on, you know, guys like Steve Dash, who was doing Twilo. You know, he did the Sound Factory. He did, you know.
It had been Private Eyes before that.
And it was Private Eyes.
Private Eyes was a club where they had. It was the first club that had video screens, and they'd have all. This is like 82, 83, 83, 84. Around the time, whenever MTV came, Private Eyes came,
was the spot,
and they had this guy programming all. Sookie, his name was, and a friend of mine, and he would, you know, all the videos. So it was like a video disco, really.
And I believe Scott Blackwell was the DJ there.
Yeah, Scott Blackwell was
originally, because
the DJ,
I played there once when it was a video club, but later on it became the Sound Factory Bar, and then Don Welch and I. Don Welch says, Louie, Frankie Knuckles plays there. He's been there about a year. Why don't we go check it out, see if you like it? I went there. I heard Frankie Knuckles, and I knew Frankie Knuckles from before because I saw him at the World and stuff, and from, you know, his records, you know, Baby Wants to Ride and Your Love and all that. But I went to his Friday night and I was blown away. So I said, let's do it. So I became the Wednesday night DJ from 92 to 97. And that was a very pivotal point for us because we were doing so much music as Masters at Work that was the stomping ground for it and the testing ground for it. And then I was calling a lot of my friends, the producers and DJs, because I was always into bringing people together and inviting everybody out. And it also became the place of, if you were even on a Broadway show, anybody in entertainment, you come hang out on Wednesday.
Was it an industry hang almost?
Yeah,
that was the idea.
That was the night, the Wednesday night there. Everyone was there. You'd be in the studio. I'd be working in the studio. Head down there 7, and all the people, Victor Simonelli, all these people I was working with at the time, we'd all end up there.
But that's where Barbara Tucker came in, because she was the connect. She knew all the dancers and all the singers. So Barbara would invite all the dancers and singers. So we had the real underground house culture, the dance culture on the dance floor. You had at the bar all the musicians and the DJs and producers and all that, and then we had all the artists that were coming out at the time, Michael Wofford, India. Oh goodness, I could go down. Susan Clark, like all those records that you heard at that time. I was playing them there, and I was playing them on a reel to reel. So I when they were out, they would bring me reel to reels or acetates, and I would play them at the club. And then I stopped with the reel to reel about '94, because it was just acetates all the time, right. So it was fun. So, but everybody found it easier to make the acetates. But yeah, that became a hangout, and I saw Arthur Baker coming in. I was like, oh my goodness, everybody, you name it in the scene. Kerry Chandler, of course, Todd Terry, Kenny Dope, like DJ Sneak. Everybody was coming and hanging out on that Wednesday night and bringing me the music. Yeah. So I was playing all the house music before it came out at that time in the 90s. At
that point, there was nothing else happening that's when I thought of New York.
Yeah, it was just Shelter and Wednesday night. It was Saturday, Timmy Regisford, Wednesday, Louie Vega at Underground.
Because
Network.
I was living in London more, and there was tons of stuff happening in London, and in New York, it was you.
Right. Really. So when I was playing those records and they weren't out yet, a lot of the English major labels were coming, and they would be signing the records. So you would have Simon Dunmore there. Yeah. You even had Alex Lowe's from Southport. Like I have, Don Walsh is putting out a book, by the way, Underground Network, that has a lot of pictures. And then you look in those pictures, you see people like Alex Lowe's from Southport hanging out in the crowd, like dancing, having a good time. So it was definitely the mecca for house music in the 90s in New York City. Terry Hunter. Everybody, just Chicago guys would come. The English would come. Italians. Everybody wanted to come on that Wednesday night because you would hear everything first, and also your records would get signed even on the spot. If they were played at the right time and the crowd is going crazy. Wow. So it was definitely an important part for 90s house music, and it doesn't really. It's like an unsung hero to me, that Wednesday night. For sure.
Yeah, it's well featured in the article that Carol wrote about you, and it seemed like that sort of industry community thing was really, really important to sort of mention in your article as well. I don't know if it fully exists anymore, like lifting each other up like that. I don't know.
No, it does. We have that spirit, and we carry on that spirit for sure. Barbara Tucker was in a group called Harlequin 4 when I played at Heartthrob. Imagine that, 86. And they did a female version of Set It Off.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right?
Yeah.
In those days, there used to be like a male version and a female version of the song sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
I did that with Jump Back and Answer.
So she was in that group, and I kind of met her in passing. It wasn't, but later on when I met her, and she was one of the promoters, it was only her and Don Welch. They were the partners. And that's when Don Welch says, Louie, Barbara Tucker sings, right? I said, yeah, I remember her from... No, he said she was in a group Harlequin 4. I said, oh my God, from 86? Yeah. And then I said, well, let's get in the studio. And that's when I got together with Lem Springsteen and India, and we wrote Beautiful People, which that keyboard is where I wrote that Rhodes part.
Boom! There we go. Nice segue.
The Roland FP8 Wax Poetics collection.
Yeah, just on that, you're talking about eclecticism, and one of the things that Wax Poetics is doing now with sort of pushing beyond just being a publisher and working much more in collecting. And when I was in Miami, we went record digging together, and you still had that sort of like hunger to find the records, and even with the place we're at, it's like a second-hand sort of kind of place, and where's that come from? And I know you're the same, Louie.
Well, I always loved all kinds of music when I was a kid. I loved jazz, I loved rock, I loved soul, funk. And, I thought of it all as music and not anything different. But what I always needed to have was a beat. It needed to have a beat. Even, obviously, when I discovered Quincy Jones, Killer Joe, Walking in Space, those records, I was listening to those records when I was like 14. So I was open to different types of music. And going back now with the radio show and Sirius, and when I do things, I try to play something that influenced me from when I was a kid. And all the records I go to, I don't really think of them as like funky, but Edgar Winter this week I played Still Alive and Well, and I listened to it. It's funky. And whether it's Cream or the Allman Brothers, there was that thing. And anything else could be on top, but the beat had to be there. And I think that's what bonded me with Bambaataa, because when Bambaataa would play, he'd play the Monkees, he'd play Aerosmith. It had nothing to do about black and white. It was just the beat. So looking for the perfect beat is something I've been sort of doing my entire life. And obviously you can never find the perfect beat, which I realized after Planet Rock, because we sat in the studio, me and John Roby, and we were like programming and trying to figure out, we're looking for a perfect beat. And we gave up basically, as far as we just kept doing different beats, and we like beat this and we change the beat. But you know, it is a theme of my life, is looking, searching, seeking, finding. You know, looking for the perfect beat. People, here's the perfect beat for you.
That itch came young.
What's that?
That itch.
Yeah, man, because I was listening to the Jackson 5, you know. My friends would look at me like, that's pop. I'm like, you know, because everyone else was listening to Rolling Stones or whatever. And then I was like, Jackson 5, the OJs, Temptations. I mean, I grew up listening, there was no color to music. It's all music, and I was like a different kid, you know, to people I grew up with, you know, just, I was open to it all, you know.
What about you, Lou? When did
a lot.
I mean, I know you grew up around it, and maybe it was preordained, maybe, I don't know, but where did the itch to collect and come from it?
You know, I think it's growing up in the Bronx, walking down the block, out of one window, you're hearing jazz, another one you're hearing like Fania, you know, salsa, Latin music. Another one in the window you're hearing rock. So, you know, we grew up in a neighborhood that had it was a melting pot of people.
I mean,
you know,
what a great place to grow up, because I mean, I grew up in the suburbs, and you know, I was driving in my car, and I got the music from the radio. Really, I walked down my street, it would be silence. There was no music in the, you know, but the car, you get your car, you listen to the AM radio, the FM radio. And then as soon as I was old enough to go to gigs, which was 14, I'd be seeing the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix. I saw all these groups live, and that kept me, that inspired me even more. But I mean, that, you know, the first time I went to the Bronx, my friend Apache Ramos, who you may know him, he worked for me later on at Streetwise. He took me to the Bronx, and I was in love, man, because it was so live, it was so alive, the Bronx, and this was 73, so you know, I was there, and driving through the Bronx, and music everywhere, and people on the street hanging out in the summer. It was amazing, and you know. Just watch Beat Street, you know, that whole vibe of the street and kids, and you know, that, you know, plugging into the electric pole, and you know, putting your decks out and playing on the street. That was happening even then in '73. You'd see that, you know. Yeah,
I mean, that's the exact year that I started collecting records, because there was a record store 2 blocks down from where I lived. So you'd hear some of the records in the block parties. And I remember the first few records I bought was maybe Melting Pot, Booker T and the MGs, the 45, Love to Love You Baby. You know what I mean? We're talking early 70s. So I think a lot of us were old souls. A lot of the young kids. I'm 7 or 8 years old, and I'm loving Earth, Wind and Fire, Elton John, goodness, Quincy, you know, all this music that came out at that time. We would also listen to on the pop station, WABC. That was the big one in New York. But you know, you would hear all these artists and amazing music, Stevie Wonder, everything on pop radio. You know, but at the same time, you know, you walk down the block maybe a few years later and see Africa Bambaataa, Jazzy J, Red Alert, and Africa Islam throwing these parties with the breakdancers. But it's what he was saying before. I would hear them playing records that were from punk rock, jazz. I mean, all the breakbeats to all these records, funk, soul, you know,
rock,
you know, in the middle of there was no hip hop yet. It was, I mean, it was early. So they were playing all these break beats and everything, and all these kids were going crazy, break dances, everything. And I was like, wow, listening to all this really inspired me. And then disco started coming in. That was early disco at that time. So my sisters, my sister went to the loft in 69, 70. She was there. And she's still dancing to this day. She's 66. She's like, you see her, she's like 30 years old. She's out there on the dance floor doing all that. My two sisters, they still go out. One was a little younger, so she came later in the loft in 76 and in the garage after that. But the earlier one, she was going out. She was there from the hippie days into the loft, to the sanctuary. She was there. My sister was there when Francis Grasso was playing.
Wow.
And she tells me a story. I'll never forget this story. She told me that one day that, my sister was 16. And in those days, they could get into those clubs.
Yeah.
That was the age, you know what I mean? And she worked at a hair place. So the hair, the guy who was on the shop, he did that famous haircut from Jane Fonda. I don't know I forgot what it's called, a shag or something.
Yeah.
He created it.
Wow.
He created it. So he used to go to these things and he'd bring the girls with him, which my sister was one of the employees. She was the hair washing girl and stuff like that. And she used to go to down there and she told me this funny story where, Mick Jagger went like this to her. And when she walked over, Bianca Jagger put her leg over and went. Like right in front.
Wow.
That is an incredible story, and that was
an incredible story.
That was at the sanctuary, like places like that. And she named me all those places where punk rock, the Something Dolls, all this stuff that she talks about back in those days.
New York Dolls, yeah.
Yeah, New York Dolls. Like she was in that scene where it was punk rock, it was a pre-disco, it was just like all this was happening in New York, and you went to all those places. It didn't matter about the music. It was all great music, and everybody wasn't into one style. They were just into great music. Yeah. And she comes from that. So I hear her stories. I hear her music when she brings them home. She's hanging out with her friends. Those days it was like gangs, this, that, whatever. And you would hear this music when cassettes started coming out from that influence. And that's what I was hearing as a kid, in my head. As well as pop music, as well as the underground thing or the block party music and all this. So, my love started growing strong. And I wanted to buy this music, so there was that little record store I used to go to. I remember I used to buy all the South Soul stuff there early. But
when did you take that, like you love the music to the point of I want to play it for other people?
Well, because
that's interesting.
I was watching the block parties and watching the DJs, and I loved it. I said, "Wow, I like this DJing thing." And then one of my good friends, his older brother, he had a GLI 9000.
That was my first mix of GLI.
Yeah, GLI 9000, right? The black one. And he had two Technique turntables. And then he had a stack of records. So I told my friend, could I check out the records? He goes, yeah, he's not here. Let's do it. So we were listening to the records. I said, oh my God, these are the break beats. These are those beats that you hear the DJs playing in the block parties. And that's when I was hearing all those break beats like Freedom, like, Get Up and Dance, like all those records like that. And then I said, can I play a little bit, try it? And then that's when I started trying it and stuff. And then from there, I really enjoyed it, but I like the blending of it. I like to blend them. So I said, okay, well, my other neighbor was a mobile DJ. He did weddings and Sweet 16s, but he had a disco collection. He had like 20 crates of disco.
Wow.
We're talking now 77, 76, 77. And then I said, do you need some help with your stuff or whatever? And he says, okay. So I started becoming his apprentice, helping him out, carrying, setting up. But in return, I said, I don't want, you don't have to pay me anything, but I would love to borrow the equipment. Can I borrow it so I can practice? And that's when I borrowed his, the two, he had a Gemini mixer.
Right.
The two turntables, the Gemini mixer, two speakers. And I would take about 4 or 5 crates of my choice. And by that time I knew disco records, and what I liked and what I wanted to, that I didn't know, that I liked the cover maybe, or I read the back, and I would take those, and then I started practicing on it. And I loved blending the disco records. I was blending them and trying to do what I saw at the block parties, and that was it. That was the beginning of it.
That's amazing. And then throughout your whole, when I came to your house, Arthur, you're just collecting all these items from your career and keeping them for prosperity, really, in a way. It's just.
Well, my wife says I'm a hoarder. Yeah, my wife is convinced I'm a hoarder, but now because of the book, she she respects the fact that I kept that because that's how I was able to tell the story. Because without all the artifacts, finding dates, putting it all into order, I could never have done it. So all the artifacts, some of which I'll be letting go with now that I've done the book and selling them on. But a lot of it made me remember the experience. I mean, you go back and you look at your rough mix on a cassette and you remember, you see the date and you see when you did it. And still looking for the rough mix of Planet Rock. I haven't found the cassette. I've got Play Your Own Risk. I've got quite a few others, but I'm still looking. I've still got another crate of cassettes to go through that we didn't get to go through. We were going through and we were playing them. These cassettes haven't been played for literally 40 years. I mean, who plays cassettes? I mean, they were but the one cassette, the most amazing cassette was a Mariah Carey demo cassette that I got the night she met Tommy Mottola when I introduced her to her. And the thing was, I had a cassette. I listened to the first 3 songs and I realized she was going to be huge. Never listened to the rest of the tape. I thought there were only, because there was no songs listed on it. There were another 6 songs on that cassette, which Dave and I listened to, and we went, wait a minute, I didn't even know. It's like a whole album. And some of the stuff she's released recently, and but I'm letting that one go. The Mariah cassette. If there's any fans of hers who collect, I don't know if there were collectors who like Mariah, but.
Now, what about you? You kept all sorts of stuff for your career. Is it similar reasons or just?
Well, no, a lot of the pieces that are in the Wax collection are more the pieces that I use on the road. Mixers, isolators, headphones, even hats.
How many hats do you think you have?
Oh goodness, I have a lot of hats. Yeah, definitely. I've let go of some too. So, but it really feels good because when you look at the pieces, the memories. When I found that big keyboard, I had it refurbished. I said, you know what, I'm going to put this in there because when you play that road sound on that keyboard, you can hear Beautiful People. Yeah. When you play the parts of Still in Love, you can hear that record in there. So at that time when Kenny and I were making records, when we would get a new piece, one keyboard can make 10 or 20 records because there was so many good sounds in it. We were so inspired. And then we would move on to another keyboard, another sound, another thing. And then we'd have the collections building, I think that, having, letting go of the pieces like that, I mean, they're really beautiful memories. And even small things to the pictures in the studios that we used to have, letting go of those, they're really beautiful memories there. And I think being in the right hands, and I'm sure people that are buying your stuff are people that love you for what you do, I mean, especially like Arthur, I mean, he was, there are producers out there, who make amazing music. But when you're a producer that's part of a movement, you created a movement. He's definitely one of them on the top of that list that created that movement in those first, the first half of 80, especially that early 80s. It just created a whole sound. And you're talking about record after record. So, hearing if it's like I'm interested in getting a piece of one of these Arthur Baker, things, because I'm a true fan of his, so I can understand how a fan feels, about having a piece of something that's a part of you.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's probably a nice little thing to end on.